Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Independent Talk series. I'm your host, Anjan Chakraborty, and I bring you the Independent Talk series, which basically seeks to chronicle the lives of independent journalists around the world. And sorry, I just got a chat from, yeah, Sid. Okay, all right, he's in. Yeah, so this series focuses on the professional lives of independent journalists, their success stories, their learnings, the challenges that they are facing, and the wonderful stories and content that they are producing day by day. Um, Once we get to know their stories, we get to learn a lot about independent journalism as a career path and how one should go about it. Without any more delay, I'm going to introduce you to our guest for this evening, Pratiba Raman. Pratiba, as she says herself, she is a feature journalist by accident, a mainstream journalist by discovery, and an independent journalist by choice. She has trod through print, broadcast, and digital, all three mediums of journalism over a span of last 12 years. And she began with film reporting for the Times of India. Then she anchored over 100 episodes of food and lifestyle shows with NDTV Hindu. She reported across the spectrum from politics to entertainment for India Today, and she then plunged into launching national websites, two of them for the Asianet group. Pratibha is now commissioned for analytical stories on politics and crime for the Quint, and she is also responsible for research and creative assets involving a crime series for the India Today television. She has also launched a news social media platform called News Sense, where she primarily does podcasts in her native Tamil language. Now, before we begin and listen to Pratibha, I'd like to set the ground rules for this talk show. So I will have few questions for Pratibha. And as all of you hear her journey as an independent journalist, if you have any questions for Pratibha, please put them in the chat room. As she finishes her talk, I'll take those questions and ask Pratibha on your behalf. We only have 1 hour, so please, whatever questions you have, just start putting them in the chat room as you hear Pratibha. Pratibha, thank you and welcome to the Independent Talk. Thank you for making time and telling us your story of being an independent journalist. So I'll just begin this session by asking about your start. I mean, how did you begin this journey as an independent journalist, and the kind of stories and the kind of assignments that you have done as an independent journalist, and which are the ones that you loved doing, and how has this journey been? Over to Pratibha.
At the outset, Anjan, thank you so much for inviting me over. It's truly a pleasure and an honor, and it's so different to sit on the other side of the fence.
I know, yeah.
So, about my start, well, it happened by choice, like I mentioned in the bio. So, there was one fine day that I thought, okay, what am I really doing? And let me just explore some of the more creative side of journalism and see if I can really take the plunge. For a very long time, I was only thinking, it only ended up planning, and it never was really implemented into a stage of execution. So there was one fine day when I realized that, okay, it's finally the moment to do it. And I just jumped into it, to the shock and dismay of everyone in the family. They were like, what? You quit your job? So that's how everybody reacted. And plus, it kind of coincidentally aligned with the pandemic, the advent of the pandemic at that time. So everybody thought that I was crazy. I was absolutely out of my mind. But then one after the other, there were assignments flowing. So the first assignment that I hit upon was with India Today, and where I had to explore a particular crime incident that took place several decades ago. So I had to literally go back in time and explore the finer details of how the case flowed and what was the actual scene of crime. And I had to visit the scene of crime. So I almost felt like I was CID. So that was one of the impetus that pushed me to go ahead. And so I thought, okay, this is it. I think I've taken the right decision. And there was no looking back after that. So one after the other assignments kept flowing. And I thought I really had the time to sit and explore every story at every different stage in time. So there was another sextortion case that happened, and I thought, okay, let me explore this story again and see what is really the details behind the scene. And so that's how, one after the other things kind of, it almost felt like it was clockwork precision. So that's how I became an independent journalist, and I don't know how far this is going to really take me.
Oh, that's great. So, I mean, by choice, but I mean, things started happening one after the other, and you started enjoying all those assignments.
So it seemed like it was destined to happen.
Yeah, right. So, I just wanted to know a little bit more about News Sense. I mean, something that you have begun. I mean, tell us about that.
There is a story behind News Sense as well, because there was a cousin of mine who was staying with me. She had an internship in Bangalore. And so she used to come, and she was into fashion technology, completely a different field for me. And so she would go around, explore all these fashion shoots and come back and tell me stories about it. And I was absolutely in eager interest to hear all of these stories. And one fine day she said that, okay, college is asking me to write something, and I need to write something about Tamil Nadu CM. Can you please help me, Didi? I don't know who really is the CM of Tamil Nadu. And I was shell shocked. I thought, okay, aren't you really seeing my stories? Aren't you seeing me on TV and trying to figure out who the CM of Tamil Nadu is? So many times I've come to Tamil Nadu, and how can you say that? Okay, my native is Tamil Nadu. Then that's when I realized that, okay, she is hardly interested in news, and she is not really watching me on television. So there has to be a way that I can form a conduit to connect me with the stories, with a news angle to these youngsters, the nephews and nieces of mine. So they were like the first set of audience for me. So that's how News Sense happened. So I launched this social media news platform, and I tried to explore Snapchat and Instagram filters. I was pretty much technologically challenged. And I guess they taught me how to use the platform, and I taught them how to explore news. So that is how News Sense is to me.
That's great. So basically, I mean, from what I understand, I mean, it's the joy of exploration, and you have your core as a journalist, and the joy of exploring new platforms, new technology, and also the understanding that, maybe the youngsters are kind of cut off from the mainstream source of information, which is print broadcast. So they are looking for, some smart choices that comes into their mobiles, and they are done with the information that they need. That's how News Sense happened. That's great to know. You also write for the Quint. I mean, you're commissioned to write for the Quint. So and how does that work? I mean, so you have I have seen some of the stories you have written in Quint. I've seen those stories. So how does that work? You pitch a story to them, or they kind of ask you if something happens in your part of the city, or your part of the state, that there's a story to be done, so would you like to do it, or can you have inputs for that story? How does that work? It's you pitching them a story, or they asking you to pitch in with inputs?
Well, it works both ways, because there are times when I pitch in a story too, and there are times when there are people asking for stories and trying to tell me, sorry, there was a complaint that there was no light on my face. So I hope this is fine.
Yeah.
So I was So there are times when I also pitch in a story. I try to hit upon this idea, or some incident happens that kind of gives me the spark, which happens very infrequent number of times. But yeah, most often they also ask me for stories and try and tell me, can you explore this angle? Can you explore that angle and tell us if it can really work? If it works, well and good. If it doesn't, then yeah, well, we'll have to give it a pass. So most often it is mutual with every organization. I think more or less it also depends on the rapport that you share with the person on the other end, who's representing the organization.
Correct. So I'm just going to ask you, in your journey so far as an independent journalist, which particular assignment or which particular project or a story which you did, which you kind of you had the most satisfaction of doing or writing about it?
Well, through the years, are you asking me only as an independent journalist or as a mainstream journalist as well?
Be an independent journalist.
Okay. As an independent journalist, there was the story that I mentioned was the sextortion story. That was a very enlightening experience because more often than not, as a mainstream journalist, you only go there, you report at the scene of crime, and then you come back, and then there are lives after lives. So that's how it happens with respect to a mainstream news platform. Whereas as an independent journalist, you are more analytical in terms of exploring the same story. So the incident that I'm talking about was something that happened recently, a couple of months ago, when a Bangalorean lost his life because he couldn't really bear the sextortion racket. So he was a victim of that racket. And so every newspaper, every news channel covered the story of this racket and who are the accused persons. But I went into the angle of when did it start, and what is the modus operandi of these accused persons, and whether the pandemic has worked as a catalyst for these rackets to grow, and how are these policemen dealing with this, taking care of the pandemic as well as such kind of crime scenes. So those were the different kinds of angles that I was exploring and putting it all together into one long piece. And that was absolutely satisfying because now you know that you've given a well-rounded story. So what you learned in your college finally kind of gets implemented on ground.
Okay. So my next question to you, Pratibha, and I've asked this to my previous guests in the Independent Talk series, uh, and probably it's a question that most would-be freelance journalists or independent journalists have in mind, is that how do you start, approaching media outlets with your story? How do you start doing that? How do you pitch a story to them? How effectively can a journalist who wants to, probably a journalist who is currently in a newsroom with a full-time job, wants to become a independent journalist, how do they go about it? How do they start pitching a story, or how do they contact organizations? So do you have any insights on this?
When I started off, there was no real guidelines, that I could really see and learn, and also I've never been a person who could go ahead and ask for any kind of favors. So this was completely new. I didn't know how am I going to approach a particular organization, and since I said everything was, it seemed like it was destined to happen. So a lot of my friends, well-wishers, told me that, okay, this person is looking for a story. Why don't you contact this editor? And they gave me the number, and I would contact the editor, and they would also talk to them on my behalf. And that's how a few of the initial assignments happened. But after that, I guess, people started telling me that, okay, you need to kind of shed your inhibitions and just randomly go and approach. And luckily for me, I mean, I've never really found a place where I would really flounder and generally very talkative. So that also kind of helps. So I guess I just kind of started knocking all doors, and that's how it just opened one after the other.
Great. So, I mean, a question that comes right after that is, so you start knocking at doors, and inhibition is something that you have to shed. If you want to do independent journalism, you have to shed that inhibition. But also, there have been, I'm told by many independent journalists that they face rejection. Uh, uh, I mean, editors, news organizations, they may not even respond to your pitch. They might respond, but they may not approve of a story. So rejection is a part of life when it comes to an independent journalist. So have you faced any such rejections? And if yes, or even if no, how do you think one should tackle that kind of rejection?
Anjan, rejection is my middle name. So it has been a part of my life all through. So be it in my personal life, be it in my professional life, yes, rejections have been there. So it's become my best buddy. So I guess that rapport that we share, rejection and I, kind of helped me surpass through all of these stages in my life. So yes, rejections happen. There are times that you're hurt, you know that that story is going to work, and then you know that the organization is making a big mistake rejecting that story. So how do I deal with it? Sometimes I would just say that, okay, let me just publish it on my platform. And luckily I have Newsense, I have my blog. So I would just explore that. If it works, well and good. If it doesn't, then too bad. But the other way of dealing with it is kind of tweak it to find another angle and yet kind of emphasize your point, or maybe kind of temper down that point and kind of have the other angle play a more dominant role. So these are the kind of permutations and combinations that you work around, and if that works, well and good, and if it doesn't, then too bad. Most often it would be resulting in a too bad situation, but it's okay, you just kind of move on. And as a mainstream journalist, I mean, all journalists have faced situations where you go and knock at a person's door for a bite, and that person just shuts the door on your face. So I guess that has kind of, proved to be the stepping stone for you to be more prepared as an independent journalist.
Right, right. And just rejection is one challenge that an independent journalist has to face. And obviously, as you said, that even our experience in mainstream journalism has taught us that yes, you will face rejection even when you're in a full-time newsroom working for any company. So apart from that, there is something that is very unique to independent journalism, which is what mainstream journalists may not face, which are actual challenges on the ground. Because as you said, you were doing that story on sextortion and you had to go and visit that place. You were also talking about this crime series that which happened almost a decade back. You visited that spot. So now as an independent journalist, you're going there, you don't really have the backing of a full stream media house behind you. How do you face those kind of challenges on the ground? How do you face those?
It's not just on ground, Anjan, even on a phone call. If you say that you are from a particular organization, the response is far better than when you say you're an independent journalist. Yes. But over the years, the kind of rapport that you build, the networking that you have, and the people that you know kind of help you through that journey in terms of putting in a word, or kind of introducing you to that person, that has helped to a large extent. And the other way of dealing with it is try and see how you can break the ice with that person. So that's how there are times when I have jumped over a compound just to tell him that I am your friend. And perhaps the means may not seem so, but then at the end of the day, it would result in a more positive note. And yes, you need to take that chance. You need to risk that particular bit in every situation. But then ultimately, I mean, it's always been that, okay, it's going to result on a positive note, and it has always worked that way. Maybe I've been lucky.
Lucky you are, Pratibha, I guess, because I have heard stories of independent journalists who have faced, I mean, real crisis-like situation on the ground when they did not have a press card and something like that. It was very, very difficult situation. Anyway, but life is different for everybody, and challenges are different for everybody. So another question that I want to ask you, and I think I'm asking you this on behalf of everybody here, is the question of financial survival. So, as an independent journalist, I mean, how do you think? Uh, do you think there are enough opportunities in reporting or in producing uh, as an independent journalist, are there enough opportunities for you or another person who wants to go into independent journalism to survive financially? I mean, will that person be able to make enough money? Are there enough avenues available? What do you think?
That's a tough question, Anjan. um, do you really, I mean, how much is enough is another question. For me, it is never enough. After having dealt with, fixed income every month, and, you have your EMIs and other commitments. So that is taken for granted that, okay, it is going to be taken care of. But when you're an independent journalist, you're every month thinking, oh my God, how am I going to pay this EMI? Will this money come in at the right time or not? Because more often than not, when you are a freelance journalist, the monies don't come in at a fixed interval of time. So sometimes it takes 2 months, sometimes it takes 3 months. So in a span of 3 months, I suddenly feel like, oh my God, I'm a crorepati today. And and immediately a month after, I'm a total bhikari. So, so there are crests and troughs through your life as an independent journalist, which has not been the case as a mainstream journalist. How you plan that finances plays a major role. I've never been good with finances, so I continue to learn that. So I'm hoping that I'll one day succeed.
Also, one more thing that, I mean, looking at the kind of work that you have been doing, uh, I mean, this is something that I think is also very important while you venture into independent journalism is diversification. And so you already in your career as a mainstream journalist, you have done print, you did television, and you also did digital. So you were one of the very few ones who have dabbled in all three mediums. Not everybody who are doing mainstream have done all three. You will find probably two at the most. All three is a rare breed of journalist in India, but you are one of those who have done all three. And then you ventured into independent. So I think, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. I think that actually helped, being able to do print, write your stories, being able to do production, broadcast, as well as do digital. So now you're writing stories for Quint. You are doing, research and asset management for a crime series for India Today Television, and you also have News Sense, which is a social media only news platform, and you are doing YouTube videos, you are doing podcasting. So like that really helped a lot, because the other journalists that I have spoken to, they kind of dabbled in print and maybe television, or print and maybe digital. So they did not have all three in their portfolio. Does that help to have all three in your portfolio before you venture into independence, so that any format of content, any format you want it, I am here, I can produce it?
Well, yes, I have been lucky in terms of, having all three, having dabbled in all three platforms. I don't know if I really excelled in any of those. So it's like jack of all trades, but master of none. And so that's how it's been for me. But then I guess today uh, advent of mobile phones in the country, it has penetrated so much that everybody is good with, say, citizen reporting. Everybody is good with their production values, because they are taking videos, they're taking photos. So today there is a very thin line between a person who can really be a person of a television journalism background or a person with a print background. The lines have really blurred today. So you don't really need that kind of skill set in terms of having acquired that experience in each of those medium. But having said that, uh, the fact that I have dabbled in all of these three platforms have kind of helped me explore further. I never thought that I would get into podcasting. And I did. And I never thought I would be exploring a Snapchat as a platform to present news. And I've done that. So I guess this experience has propelled me in terms of exploring other platforms as well, even though I have zilch knowledge about it. But I thought, okay, why not give it a shot? And trust me, Anjan, my Tamil was super bad, and it is still, but I'm still trying to see if I can really connect with my native audience and see if my Tamil can really somewhere down the line match their Tamil. So ultimately it's just communication that matters. So I'm trying all of this, which I would have never done if I were just, sitting as a mainstream journalist. So I guess that shift kind of told me to explore all of these.
I mean, just to take a kind of a subset to that main question. I mean, this is primarily for the journalism students. I think there are a few journalism students here, and they kind of ask me that, I have been told in my journalism school or university that you can do specialization in print, you can do specialization in broadcast, or you go to PR and advertising and the other kind of stuff. But nobody is really into specialization as far as digital is concerned. I think the specialization still happens as far as print broadcast is concerned. There may be special classes held for digital, but there is no specialization. But for any aspiring journalist who is still a student, do you think it's really important to learn all these new media skills? Like you said, you are doing podcasting. You are now basically evolving into a social media news producer while you are experimenting with Snapchat. So even that experiment, like using Snapchat as a platform to disseminate news, I mean, that's not something is mainstream media or mainstream journalists will be doing. So, do you think it is essential for somebody who wants to become a journalist to really start looking at these platforms, these newer mediums and platforms through which they can disseminate information?
But there is a twofold answer to that. One is that 60% of the country is extremely young. So the only way to connect with them is to explore all of these new mediums, all of these new platforms. And the other way of looking at it is you need to have these skill sets because everybody is now on social media. I mean, name a person who is not. Even a farmer in my native village uh, is a great influencer on Facebook. So, so looking at all of these, I guess social media is the place to be, and digital is the future of journalism, like everybody is pointing out. So, keeping all of that in mind, yes, it is important for one to specialize in each of those platforms, explore them, and try to build your skill sets in those. Uh, newer evolving platforms and try and see how you can make a mark, and even in terms of specializing in digital journalism, I just thought, okay, what's the big deal? It's just print on the computer. So I was only looking at it that way until I really joined a digital organization, that I realized that there is so much more to it. There are things like SEO, there are keywords, and you need to know how to market that. And unless you have page views, your stories won't get read. So these are some things that I discovered only after joining the digital organization. And I guess somewhere down the line, my career path has helped me discover all of these at the right stage in time. So I joined a digital organization when India was pretty new to digital organization. And today, yes, we are far, far ahead. So I don't know what tomorrow holds. So I guess you need to be prepared to face that.
I think the pandemic kind of, propelled the entire population of, both urban as well as rural youth to go towards digital. I mean, digital was taking over slowly from print and broadcast, but this last 1.5 years of lockdown and pandemic, I mean, the speed at which digital adoption has happened is I mean, mind-boggling actually.
Absolutely, because I consume news on Instagram, and I never thought that, all of these mainstream platforms would be exploring Instagram as a platform to disseminate news, like you pointed out. But then the pandemic has kind of, changed all of this. So now I see newer ways of presenting my news when I look at all of these platforms on Instagram. So that is like my the learning chapters on Instagram.
Thank you, Pratibha. That was a lovely insight into your journey into independent journalism, and what are the things that you have been doing. It's actually lovely to hear your journey, and I think you inspire a lot of people who want to get into freelance journalism and want to dabble with multiple mediums different platforms. So I'll
Thank
now
you, Anjan.
taking questions from our participants.
I hope they are soft on me.
Yeah. First question comes from Kusumika Das. Her question is, what are the shortcomings that you have faced in your journey?
Kusumika, as a mainstream journalist as well as an independent journalist, so there are two different shortcomings that I've faced. So as a mainstream journalist, the shortcomings were the fact that when I got into mainstream news, it happened by discovery, like I mentioned. So uh, the first field as a print, it happened by accident, right? I never thought that I would become a journalist in the first place. I guess somewhere down the line it played in my subconscious because my father always wanted to become a journalist. So I guess that kind of uh, got instilled into my system and played in my subconscious, and that's how I became a journalist. So at that stage I was pretty new, so I had to really learn the ropes. I was pretty bad with current affairs, and I just thought, okay, journalism is all about glamour. I'll be interviewing a Shah Rukh Khan or a Rajnikant one day, and that's it. Journalism was just so much to me. And it's only after that that I really started enjoying learning the ropes, learning the tricks of the trade when you're on ground. So that's how it happened at every stage. And it wasn't really easy a task. It was pretty difficult for me. I was made fun of, I was mocked at, that I didn't know a particular politician, or I couldn't understand the language that he was speaking. So I had to bear all that in mind, endure all of that humiliation, and then kind of learn, and then finally understand what politics is all about today. To the stage, I guess that also kind of pushed me to learn politics and try and see to build a platform for myself today to kind of give analytical pieces, analytical information on politics. So that was the shortcoming on that front. But as an independent journalist, trying to make a mark, trying to pitch your story and trying to see if that would, find a place somewhere on any kind of publication is a big deal. So finally, when I see a byline, it started off as a print journalist way back then when I felt so happy seeing my byline. And I guess life comes a full cycle today. So finally, when I get to see that byline, oh my God, the satisfaction is tremendous. Forget the money, I just want to do this. So that's how it is. I don't know if I've answered the question, but yes.
Yeah, I think, Kusumika, if you have a supplementary on that, you can come back, Kusumika. Okay, the next question comes from her again. So the question is, what are the risk factors for an independent journalist?
Risk factors are that in case you are exploring an investigative story, you do not have a platform to back you or give you any kind of legal support. So I don't know how far that really works in an international organization because I haven't explored that. But with respect to Indian media, even as a mainstream journalist, you do not have enough protection. And as an independent journalist, forget that you don't even have a press card to protect you. So forget having that kind of legal protection. So be extremely careful when you are exploring an investigative angle to a particular story. Unless you have that as a written document, I would suggest do not really risk your life. It's not really worth it.
Yeah, I think that's the most important advice that you can get. I mean, don't risk your life if it is not that important. Your life is more important than that story. Let's understand. Let's be very, very clear on that. Okay, so the next question comes from Abhirupa Mazumdar. Her question is, do citizen journalism has any scope to evolve into mainstream journalism without any formal background?
Well, I guess it is not too far when you will really actually see that particular idea that you have in mind. Because News Sense as a platform really explores, at least in some small infinitesimal manner, of exploring citizen journalism and presenting that on the platform, because I cannot really at this point in time afford to pay journalists or have stringers around. So the only way I can do that is perhaps have a student journalist somewhere and tell me that, okay, this story and is perhaps looking at a platform to present that story, and I say, okay, why not we have a collaboration? So it is still in its very nascent stage, but I guess somewhere down the line, with your best wishes, if I become successful, this could work as a model for everyone to operate. But yes, it's not too far.
And just to add on that point, I mean, citizen journalism, I think there are lots of mainstream media companies which have kind of given a kind of space to
True.
journalism.
There are like half an hours and things like that. Even on bulletins, you have that.
But
Yes.
I don't think they can afford to give more space to that. Otherwise, that will take over their own news delivery. But I think citizen journalism has to evolve independently. I mean, even if mainstream gives you a space for a half an hour slot or a 1 hour, or maybe a newspaper devotes, 3-4 columns per week, it cannot go beyond that. So citizen journalism, if it wants to evolve, probably it will evolve independently only. And
Exactly, yes.
maybe it
But
won't.
there are so many smaller digital organizations mushrooming everywhere in the country. So I guess they have a very limited, pool of talent in their organization. So the only way forward would be to kind of expand, would be to get all of these citizen journalists into their fold. So I guess the day is not too far.
Yeah, in fact, I think the first guest on our talk show series, Divash, he told me that he writes for this US based online news platform. It's called Zenga News US, and it's been founded by independent journalists in the US, and they only collaborate with independent journalists around the world, and they are the only ones who are producing stories. So it's like a network of independent journalists around the world who are producing stories, and everybody who is producing a story for them does not become somebody who is assigned a freelance job. They kind of become a shareholder in that platform, something like that. So it's pretty unique actually. So I guess even citizen journalism here, if it wants to evolve, it has to find maybe a new platform, or coming together of a lot of people from different parts of the country and giving that voice independently.
True.
Anyway, the next question comes from Omkar Deshpande. His question is, as Pratibha is working on a lot of things at a time, how does she figure out when to do what, how to pick and what to skip?
That's a nice way of putting it. I still don't have the right answer to that. There are times when the idea just strikes, and I just decide, okay, I need to pitch it to this platform. If not this platform, okay, the next platform. So it's always a permutation combination, and I'm all over the place. I'm the most disorganized journalist that you could ever find. So it just kind of, okay, tick, tick, tick. Okay, not working. Okay, go to the next. Tick, tick, tick. So that's how my life has always been, and I guess it'll continue that way forever. But yes, there are times when you kind of know that this organization has this particular ideology or has this particular agenda that they follow. So once you kind of hit that note of or that rapport with that particular person that you're interacting with, you know that okay, this story would automatically fall in line with that particular organization. Just takes a couple of stories for you to figure that out, but after that you can set sailing.
And I think, just to add, I think even for a mainstream journalist, if you're working in a print organization or in a broadcast or even digital, I mean, it's not that you are at any given point of time only working on one story. You may be assigned two or three. There is one assignment you have to go in the morning. Even before you have come back and written that, you have to go to another assignment. And maybe in the middle of that, you have to get a bite from somebody. You have to go to that place. So it's like you are, even in a mainstream reporting job, it can happen that you are actually working on multiple stories in a given day. Even that can happen. It's not just for an independent journalist, right?
That's right. But also, I mean, I kind of ensure that within a week I have these platforms covered. So yeah, I guess that kind of works in my mind somewhere down the line. So I know that in this week I need to put out a podcast. I know that in this week I need to put out a YouTube video of mine, or I know that News Sense should have something on an everyday basis. So those are the broader outline that I have. But in terms of the nitty-gritties of planning a particular day, I'm all over the place.
Okay. So the next question is, how do you see podcasting evolving into a model where independent journalists can just focus on that and leave everything aside?
Well, if not for the pandemic, I do not think that podcast would have had that kind of a rage in India, because prior to that, um, I guess within my circle of friends and journalists, I was the only person listening to podcasts on an everyday basis. So I did not really have a person to go and share and tell them that, look, listen to this podcast. Of course, the younger ones did, but then they wouldn't really, you cannot really understand the kind of podcast that they would listen to, or the kind of podcast that you really want to hear or enjoy. So but with the advent of the pandemic, one of the good things is that everybody has started getting onto podcasting as a producer or podcasting as a listener. So, since you have that kind of an increasing audience to podcasts, I guess sooner or later that would also work as a platform for many independent journalists to explore and perhaps make that as the best alternative for either news or any kind of stories that you want to listen to. So, just like how we thought, okay, digital organizations are at its nascent stage in India, podcasting is somewhere down the line, somewhere on the somewhere midway towards achieving that target.
Okay. I mean, supplementary to that is, do you think in a couple of years' time, or maybe 3-4 years' time, uh, we can make enough revenue from podcasting as an independent podcaster?
I am yet to explore that, but in terms of making enough money, like how you have YouTubers, podcast is still not really arrived in India. But yes, sooner or later it should, I guess, because I can see a whole lot of people already telling me. I think I interviewed a stand-up comedian some time ago for News Sense, who was telling me that he never really thought that he would get into podcasting, but he got into podcasting and he became a super hit. His humor kind of touched the chord with a particular organization that was into podcasting, and that's how he kind of made a name. So as of now, it's in terms of reputation building stage, but sooner or later, I guess it's going to be money making stage as well.
Okay. Okay. I think that answers the entire podcasting puzzle, if I can say. Okay. So the next question is, this is purely on social media. So next question is, do you think, uh, as a news disseminator, if I use Facebook, YouTube, and podcasting, so I have three different platforms and mediums, and I am producing news only on social media, is that something for the future? My news will only be on social media.
To answer that question, recently I read an article about a person who comes from a tribal background, lives in Odisha, just suddenly thought, okay, why not I invest in a cell phone, borrows money from some person, buys a cell phone, and tries to get into YouTube and starts making YouTube videos about tribal cuisine. It became an instant super hit, and today he's earning a decent income just out of YouTube. And we are talking about a tribal farmer in Odisha. So I am here trying to make, political videos, and I'm struggling to get views. So I guess somewhere you need to have that luck. You need to kind of hit the right note at the right time, get the right audience, and then you're just, on the way to success. So it just needs that particular uh,
hitting the idea at the right time and the lady luck shining on you, and then you have everything set for your life in terms of getting or exploring social media. So I guess, I hope that answers your question. All you need is that right idea at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, I mean, this is, and Pratibha was talking about how this farmer from Odisha, went on to YouTube and has become a hit as a YouTuber. And though this is not news, this is non-news, but food and recipe is a part of lifestyle, that we see in mainstream media as well. I have, in fact, I was just looking at the 2021 Reuters digital news report, and in fact, their report on India, they are saying that more than 63% of our population is consuming news only on social media. So Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, WhatsApp, that's all. I mean, YouTube. So all social media, 63% of population, and that's pure news. I mean, hard news. So if you can add entertainment, lifestyle, fashion, food, all of that, I think it's going to go up to 90%. I mean, to be very honest, uh, in 1 or 2 years' time, we may be getting every news as well as non-news content only on social media.
And in fact, I mean, you have a particular criteria to meet. So once you have so many subscribers and so many views, the social media platforms pay you for that. And apart from that, you also have ads and revenues and collaborations with different brands. So that's how people make money using social media. So the right way to do it is to meet that criteria fast and earn potloads of money.
I think that kind of also answers the earlier question I had about two. One was, how do I pitch a story to an independent news organization? And the second was, how do I make enough money as an independent journalist? I think here is an answer for both. I mean, you don't need to pitch your story to a news organization anymore. I mean, we are living in a world where you use your own social media handles, your own YouTube channels, or your own website where you blog. You have your own independent channels of disseminating news, and you can start earning money from there. You don't need to pitch your story to somebody else
That's true.
and start making money. I mean, that's where probably in 5 years' time, you don't know, that's where every would-be journalist would be
It's going to
looking
be.
to become an independent journalist and only become an independent content creator. They don't need to join a news organization, maybe. I mean, I don't know. In 5 years' time, that's how we'll see journalism schools are, kind of getting students into that path. We don't know that. Anyway,
You never know, Anjan. We might be thinking way back, oh, we had this conversation then.
yeah, we don't know. I mean, when we began, we were told, yeah, there's just TV and print, right? You can
True.
go for print, which is newspaper or magazine, or you go to television. We were told that radio is dead, don't go to radio. It's either television or print. And now we are talking digital, but maybe, in 3 4 years time, we will be only talking about social and your own platforms. You don't need to go to mainstream media to get news, because people are not going to mainstream media to get news. So while you as a content creator, you can directly reach your audience on the platforms that are in social. So we don't know. I mean, it was nice to have this conversation actually. Yeah, but we
True.
don't know, 5 years down the line, we might look back and say,
Yeah. And say, oh, yeah, what we predicted came true.
yeah. Anyway, so I don't have any more questions. Okay, so that rounds up the Q&A round for us today. So thank you, Pratibha. It was lovely having you, and it was nice listening to your journey and your insights and thoughts about independent journalism. Uh, Obviously, I hope everybody who was here got to learn a lot from your journey, and probably you can inspire, your journey has inspired few of them to take up independent journalism. And also we have spoken of the opportunities that are there and how the future can evolve in that entire media spectrum. I hope everyone, it was a helpful session, and thank you, Pratibha, once again. We will be back next week with the Independent Talk with a new guest, and I'll let all of you know who that guest is. Thank you, Pratibha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjan. It was lovely talking to you, and I hope I really did inspire and I did not really frighten them away.
No, you haven't. You were lovely. Thank you, Pratibha. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye-bye.